Conversation time, and I'm here, Darren Lewis. Troy Townsend's also here as usual. So too is Rodney. Hinds. I'm pleased to say the Charlton striker Lyle Taylor joins us as well. 11 goals so far this season from 22 appearances. No football at the moment to add to that, but he's still ready to shoot from the hip. Hi, Lyle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How have you been coping with the lockdown?
It was okay to start with. I mean, I was probably 7 weeks in, and then I just hit the wall. I had no motivation to go and do my running, to do my gym work, to do anything. I just wanted some time off, and we can't have it. So I tried to come in and kind of just get through. And I did until last week, and last week I only did 2 of the 4 runs that we were supposed to do because I just had enough. Like, you go to the training, like, I'm running at the training ground still, so I'm going to the training ground. I'm doing my running. I'm there on my own. Like, I might bump into a couple of the other boys. Not really going to have much of a conversation because I suppose you kind of have to take this seriously. And I'm just fed up of it, to be completely honest with you.
Very solitary life at the moment, isn't it? People kind of get this misconception about players, and it's okay, they're getting paid, they're not doing anything, but it's quite the opposite.
It's a nightmare because if you think about it, we don't play solitary sport, right? 5 out of 7 days or 6 out of 7 days in the week, you're surrounded by the same boys, and whether you get on with them really, really well or you don't get on with them so well, they're still your teammates, and you still miss the fact that they're not there, and you can't have normal conversations and interactions with them. And it's that kind of day in, day out camaraderie that we don't have now, and it's almost strange. You find yourself climbing the walls at times. Like, I've been scarifying my garden by hand. I could have gone and got a machine for £60 and done it in probably 2 hours, but I've been doing it by hand just for something to do. So I'm out there raking grass. Like, it's just mad. Right? The things you find.
Lyle, so is it having a detrimental effect on your mental well-being, or is this just a phase that obviously you've got to get over, and it's just the normal frustration, like you said, of being in isolation and not part of a team structure?
I wouldn't say my mental well-being is taking a hit. I'll be honest. I know of people who have suffered, and to be completely honest with you, I couldn't sit here and say that I'm suffering. And I know there's people I know circumstances, and everyone's circumstances are different, but I know there's people who are stuck in high-rise flats and things like that, and they don't have a garden, and they don't have the ability or the I suppose the things to do that I can do. Like, I can go and do my garden, drive to the training ground to do my running and do things like that. So I can't complain, and you won't hear me complaining, and this is why I'm not complaining. I have nothing to complain about. There are people actually suffering who have something to complain about, and they're not complaining. So what am I complaining? Do you know what I mean? I'm healthy, I'm well, and I can actually exercise in a private setting of the training ground, and I can go and sit in my back garden and tan if I wanted to sit in my back garden and tan. You know what I mean? I have the capacity to do different things that other people can't do.
From my own viewpoint, for example, I'll be honest with you, the 7 weeks, there have been maybe a couple of days when you haven't felt at it, So TT there talked about mental health. I think it is important, and I think we've said it on the show before, that the physical aspect of it can help the mental aspect of it. And I think that's what it's done. So, like, this morning I've done my exercise, gone for my run, and I've got to say I feel better. I mean, I'm not doing anything to the level of what Lyle and other professional sports people are doing, but it helps. But I can tell you there have been a couple of days out of the 7, when you think about it, 2 days out of 7 weeks, where it's been a little bit, not really feeling it today. But you've got to get over it. And it's easier said than done for certain other people. I've spoken to some friends over the weekends, and one of the things that we've agreed, when the time's right, if you feel the need, let's have a conversation, pardon the pun. Do you know what I mean? Let's talk, whether that be through the social media of WhatsApp, etc., or just picking up a phone. And that won't be the case every day, because some days you want a little peace and quiet to yourself. But I think lines of communication are important as well. So people know that you care, you're in the same boat, and you find out, you know, that, listen, it's a common problem, isn't it? That's the problem. It is a common problem and it's not going away.
Troy, with all that in mind, Glenn Murray's been speaking. We've only just eased the lockdown, but we still have a virus out there. What is the rush? You agree with that, don't you?
Yeah, I do, very much so. And I've got to be honest, I'm really worried about a second spike. I'm worried that we've eased the lockdown, which wasn't really a lockdown before. If you were walking through certain parks and when the sun was out and the picnics were all about and the ice cream van had turned up. You know, I just think I looked at Wednesday and thought people are on buses, people are on public transport without masks, without seemingly the correct protection. And I honestly worry that we are going to go to a second spike before we get out of what we've had to experience for the last 7 weeks. And in that case, for me, then football again is secondary. And you know, I think we're going to look at Germany quite a bit and what happens in Germany, the Bundesliga over this weekend and the following weekends, and see what happens there, and maybe use that as a guide as to whether we are doing the right thing in terms of coming back.
But here's the thing, Troy. Everyone says that. I hear that so often. And yet the German media have been scathing about the English treatment of the coronavirus, about the English government's handling of the coronavirus. We're not going to get political on here, but the condemnation in the German media for the way that things have been treated. And bear in mind, they've got far fewer, less than half the number of coronavirus deaths in Germany than we have in this country. So I'm not really sure why we're all looking at Germany, because they've been far more disciplined about the way that they've handled things. Okay,
they've been far more disciplined, but Dynamo Dresden are in isolation at the moment and they won't be kicking off the season this season. There's other players that have been tested positive and they will not be a part of the season as it opens, you know, on the weekend. Is that fair? Is that right? They've contracted the virus through whatever means they have, and now they can't go and do their job, you know. So I don't get into this, you know, critical stuff from other nations. Everyone has to do what they have to do, what's right for their environment. But at the moment, we've not got a level playing field, because, and this is why I say we've got to look at Germany, because ultimately they've got a whole team that is now in isolation and cannot kick off the season. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right that one team is ostracized because ultimately their players have had to quarantine. So I say we've got to look at Germany, because if there is a situation that when they are actually playing football, that the increase of the virus amongst players becomes more prevalent, then we have to discuss it. It would be wrong for us not to discuss.
Lyle?
I think it's difficult because, okay, with the example of Dynamo Dresden, their whole team now sits out. So I don't know who they were supposed to play this weekend, but they now don't have a game. So when is that game going to get caught up on? Like, if another team gets this and they've got to play Dynamo Dresden for the rest of the season, Dynamo Dresden have missed 2 games already, and then they stand the risk of missing another one if one of their opponents' teams ends up in isolation or quarantine, whatever you want to call it. So when does that get finished? Like, all of a sudden, we're going to be in August and September going, right, well, we still got to finish the last 2 weeks of last season. No, if football can't be played as football is, why are we forcing it? I don't understand it. I really don't get it. I saw Dave Edwards did an interview the other day, and he said he's a little bit worried and he doesn't understand why, when people are dying and when people are contracting the virus, why we're worried about football. I'll be completely honest with you. We are just human beings like anyone else. We could get this, we could die. Now, if a footballer gets this and dies, watch all hell break loose. Because that's the only way it's right. We're being forced into doing something, and we are but human too. Now, they're saying that, I've seen other people saying, oh yeah, well, everyone else is being forced to, or being told to go back to work. Well, yeah, that's fine. They're being told to go back to work if they can work in a safe environment and socially distanced from colleagues or other people that they work with or for. Now, I can't play football without getting in someone's face or getting touch tight to someone. So surely my job is not, it's not doable. I can't do my job. So if I can't do my job, why are they telling me that I have to go back to work?
Well,
I don't get it.
Let me just jump in here, because the statements that have been made are that players will be tested and tested and tested, and that everyone keeps saying it'll be safer than a trip to the supermarket.
But why are we getting tested? Like, there are people out there dying, like literally dying. There are families out there who are losing members of their own family, their mums, their dads, their brothers, their sisters, their aunts, their uncles. There are people who can't get tests, who are actually potentially carrying this virus and suffering. And we're worried about testing footballers 2 or 3 times a week. Why? Why are we wasting the time and the money and the resources on people who aren't vital? We are not necessary. We are not the be all and end all of everything. We're not. We're just human beings.
Just stick with you for a second, Lyle. There is a feeling that there is an entire industry that rests on football. There are people off the pitch, people whose livelihoods depend on football. And that's the reason why, if it can, in a safe environment, football should come back. What do you say to that?
I understand that, and I do. I think that it's right that people are able to go back and work if it is safe. But let's be honest, the people who have been furloughed, let's use Charlton for example, the people who have been furloughed at Charlton Athletic aren't going to be coming back if football comes back. The people in the ticket office, the people in hospitality, they're not going to be coming back. So who are we really forcing this through for? Are we forcing this through so that the Premier League don't have to pay Sky back £750 million? Or are we forcing this through because it's the right thing to do? Because to me, it seems like this is driven by money. And if the money aspect wasn't there, they wouldn't even be giving football a second thought.
To go back to your original point, D, yes, in terms of Glenn Murray, he's absolutely right. Why the rush? If you want a real reality check, and I've said it on this forum before, all you have to do is check the daily briefings that the government give you. Okay? Just check those briefings. When people's are losing loved ones, as Lyle has said, I think it's such a rush. It's almost getting embarrassing. Football coming back, project restart. It can't happen right now, because with Boris and the government easing restrictions slightly, we have got to be so careful that in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're not back to square one.
But Rodney, and we're talking about the argument is that if football doesn't come back, clubs could go to clubs who need.
I hear you, but guess what? There at this very minute, there are 40,000 lives that are not coming back. And when you say 40,000 dead, if that's the true figure, what about the families, friends, associates, colleagues of all those people that will be affected by those deaths? Right now, football has no place in our society, no place whatsoever. I've said to you before, at the right time, it will be the catalyst of good, and people will be happy to be out and watch the beautiful game. Right now, the beautiful game is pretty ugly if it comes back. And as I said, we've talked about it on this forum. When Mikel Arteta went down with COVID, the Premier League and the world seemed to change, right? And as Lyle has said, if we get a player or two going down the same route or worse than Arteta, is it only then are we going to say no football? It's an indecent haste.
Rodney, all right, okay. So I'm just going to throw you some of the detail that we know about the return to work protocol. They're saying that there'll be clubs that appoint a COVID-19 officer. They're going to draw up an operational policy that players and staff are going to sign. We'll get your view on that in a second. Lyle, twice weekly coronavirus antibody tests and temperature screening protocols. Well, I already know your view on that. Going to arrive, and they're going to get change and provide their own drinks. There'll be no manual therapy treatment such as massages.
Darren, can I stop you there? There is no rhyme or reason to this virus. This virus came from somewhere, and this virus has actually been in British air, from what I can understand, from since January. Some of us actually may have been walking with the virus without any knowledge. So I understand the testing. I understand the reasoning behind trying to get football back. I don't understand why it's so public, by the way. I can't understand why these conversations are not held and nothing is leaked to the press. And I'm sorry about that. But ultimately, if a player coughs on a football pitch, like he may do,
we need to know. People need to know.
Sorry. No, we need to know some elements, but we don't need to know all the stuff that seems to be coming out, which is now driving people crazy. But yet the way that they're trying to bring it back, or seemingly trying to bring it back, is to make it this non-contact thing where actually it seems like a Lyle Taylor might be able to wiggle all the way through from halfway line without any contact and pop one in the back of the net. It just seems forced to me. It just seems like, again, going back to the point that we are rushing it for obvious reasons, and I understand it, but ultimately, you know, like both guys have said, you know, if we were to then see someone fall down with the virus again through playing the game, I mean, who's going to be held accountable? Who's going to be, and what if that player has to go back to a family that is, you know, I don't know, 2 generations old, 3 generations old under the same household, etc., and stuff like that? What are we going to think then? You know, so the risk for me is too high, no matter what the experts say. And absolutely at this time, I haven't seen an expert that has convinced me that actually the government is doing the right thing. So when they're saying government experts, it's the government experts that are letting us down quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, Rodney makes a very key point, actually, when he talks about the fact that football actually shut itself down when Arteta tested positive.
Absolutely.
About following government advice. When football wants to take a decision, it actually can.
Absolutely right. I mean, as we all know, I think the week prior to Arteta getting COVID, we did have the Cheltenham Racing, didn't we? Where we had 50,000 people from, I think it was the Tuesday to the Friday, turn up, no problem. And you're almost thinking, what's going on here? And, you know, I think Arteta went down with COVID. I think it was the Thursday night, it broke, everybody jumped up and down. But that weekend's games were still scheduled to take place, weren't they? And it was only because he went down with the infection that everybody...
Callum Hudson-Odoi.
Absolutely. Everybody seemed to make a belated decision. Cheltenham, packed tube trains, etc., etc. Must surely
League,
led
Liverpool,
Champions
Atletico
League
Madrid.
Must surely have led indirectly, I'm not even saying deliberately, to some of the deaths that we now know have taken place. Because we're talking about, as Troy said, there's a level of uncertainty. If you listen to those briefings on a regular basis, and I try not to because they depress me, right? If you listen to those briefings, with all due respect, even the scientists don't know what they're talking about because we've not been here before. And we're a year to 18 months away from getting any sort of real alleviation from it. I know there was news about some antibodies this morning, which was a slightly positive step. But the uncertainty of it all is what really rankles with me because no one can tell me anything definitive right now.
Now, Lyle, Danny Rose spoke earlier this week and said that we should put the nation first, pretty much what you've been saying, and that we're prioritising the nation's morale, when actually we should be prioritising the nation's health. They didn't quite put it that way, which is understandable. He was talking to somebody he's very comfortable with. He used language that most people would use if they were in the pub talking about it anyway. But he was heavily criticised for that. Do you think players are partly afraid to come out and speak their mind, as you have done, for that reason, because they're worried about getting criticised?
We are going to be criticised no matter what we say or what we do. And this is now the society we live in. And we're now accessible. Because of social media, we are now accessible. So if you say the sky is blue, someone's going to come back at you and say, no, it's not. Like, we now live in a society where no matter what you do or what you say, somebody's going to take offence or somebody's going to have an issue with it. And they now have a platform where they can voice those issues and voice those opinions. Now, we can sit and have a frank conversation, and I'm not going to mince my words, and I won't. I might not use the same language if we were having a conversation in person and there was no camera, but I'm not going to mince my words. Now, I do not believe that us going back is the right thing. But at the end of the day, if my club turn around to me and say, go back, then unless I've got a valid reason for that, I have to go back. Now, using that as an example, if I don't go back, the fans are going to have something to say about it. Why everyone else can go back, but Lyle can't go back. And if I do go back, there's some fans going to say, why are they all going back? This is ridiculous. This isn't right. So it's very difficult to do what is deemed to be right because everybody has an opinion. The problem Danny Rose has is that he's already got people's backs up by being outspoken. In the same way that I have, I might say something and people want to shoot me down straight away because I've been outspoken and I've made my opinion known. Now, for me, Danny can do no right. He can't do right for doing wrong. It's as simple as that. Like, there is nothing he can do. But the way I see it, his opinion, the same as anyone else's, is valid. And speaking from inside the game, his opinion on what should happen with the game is even more valid than other people's opinion. So if people don't want to hear it, then that's on them.
And in some respects, it's more valid because as a young black athlete and knowing that the figures for black men twice as likely to contract coronavirus as white men, and we've got 35% of BAME people in critical, intensive care. So if you're a performer, you're not so much worried about yourself, but you're worried about the impact that it might have on the people around you.
So where that's concerned, I do take issue with it. So I don't know, and I'm not saying this from a point of fact, but I don't know if those facts and figures aren't skewed. Because if you take into example ethnic minority families, they tend to be bigger, and you tend to see more often than in white families. And as somebody of mixed heritage, I've got a white mum and a black dad and a white stepmom, so I've got two white families and one black family. Black families tend to be larger and you see more generations in one household. And I've seen that in Asian families as well. So my question is it the fact that black people or ethnic minorities are more susceptible to this virus, or is it the viral load from somebody who gets this virus and goes home and shares it with 3 generations, 4 generations, leaving those people more susceptible to being in ICU or dying? I don't know. But they're saying about impoverished parts of the country and impoverished parts of the cities in London and wherever. And they seem to be talking about black people, like there's only black people or ethnic minorities there. Like there's no white people there or white people dying from this. I don't understand why they feel the need to shift this onto something like that. I don't understand it. And then I look at the cleaners in hospitals and social care institutions and the social care system. Now, I might be wrong here, but whenever I've been in a hospital and seen cleaners and things like that, they tend to be foreign, as in European, but not from England, or they tend to be African, or they tend to be from the Caribbean, or they'll be Asian. So their viral load would be a lot more than, let's say, Joe Bloggs, who lives over the road from me, who's been isolating, because they're going to work. So there are portions of black society and ethnic minority society that are still going to work and doing these jobs, these, let's call them menial jobs that other people won't take on, like cleaning and like that. So public service, and yes, exposure to the virus is going to be great than somebody who's down the road from me who's been isolated for 8 weeks. So is it skewed? Is it slightly misleading? I don't know, possibly, but that's another way of looking at it. And I'm not 100% sure they are representing the facts as they are, more as they want them to be.
Well, I think the figures from the National Office of National Statistics and from NHS England, and obviously we know the anecdotal evidence as well, has shown that over 70% of the NHS workers to have died are BAME. And we also know that the figure, initially people were saying it's 4 times as likely if you're black, or ethnic minority, but that was adjusted for age and location and other figures as well, and it's twice as likely to die or to contract the coronavirus if you're Black, Asian, or mixed race. I mean, certainly we can see, and I'll bring you guys in, that people working at the coalface, as it were, are indeed twice as likely to contract it because they have no choice, particularly the lower paid workers who have to do those menial jobs. So you can understand what I'll say.
Yeah, I'm going to let Rodney answer that part. I want to go back to Danny Rose, if you don't mind, because I think this is a particular issue that you're right has riled people up. I first of all want to applaud players during this period of time who have gone on to platforms that are not the norm for many. You know, they're normally in the mainstream platforms, being asked by Talk Sport or being asked by Sky Sports, and all that is managed by the football club. I've seen so many players now who have gone onto platforms, Instagram lives, or, you know, on other platforms, and share their views with a different type of audience, or an audience, a selected audience. For me, that's amazing. Lyle said earlier about players are human. Why can't they do that? Why can't they share their views? Why can't they talk in a manner that is cool? Now, other people swear. Danny was quite aggressive with the way that he wanted to say it. He came across. I've seen him battered on national radio. He didn't comment on national radio. He commented on an Instagram live. And I want these players to be as human as they can. And why not be able to be yourself, be human? Because I'm quite sure some of the people that are on these other registered platforms as such do that in their own spare time. This is Danny's spare time. All right, people have picked up the quotes, great stuff. And now they've chosen the word that he used to batter him. I agree with Lyle. Players can't win no matter what they say. Danny Rose can't win because he's been very vocal and vociferous in his battle and challenge against racism and the effects that it's had on him. And people don't care, you know. But for me, I like a Danny Rose because he's raw. And he says it as it is. He doesn't change his look for a particular environment. And why should he have to? You know, and it's a natural, it was a natural response. And for me, I don't have issues with those natural responses. I'd rather that than the staged one with the script in front of you that says, make sure you add all these points in when you can. I'm quite vocal on that because, you know, they're right. The players can't win no matter what they do. They can't win.
Let's stick with this then, because we have seen an upsurge in players choosing to do the more formal interviews like this one, Lyle, where they're much more comfortable, they're not put under any kind of pressure, and they can be themselves.
Let me just say, in terms of what Lyle and Troy said about Danny, absolutely right. I support what he's about. Lyle hit it on the head. I mean, I think Danny could make a major donation, and he might well have done, to the NHS, and he would still get criticised, right? Because he's Danny Rose. And I think that's pretty sad, but he's an experienced campaigner. He's been around the block to the point he doesn't care now about the criticism. Do you know what I mean? Speak your mind. And to go back to your point, Darren, in terms of these type of forums and players being on them, I think we talk about a new normal. I think that's the way things are going to be now. I think the pressure cooker and that top off the fizzy bottle is now going to be released. And I think people are going to be a little bit more expansive and maybe less choosy about where they speak now. Yes, you still need to be careful, but I think the whole media thing was very starchy, very rigid. And I think that will change because, as Lyle said earlier on, everyone's got an opinion. It's just a matter of where it's shared, how it's shared, etc., etc. So listen, most of us know, all of us know that whether it be media or otherwise, it's about building relationships. And I think relationships have been built to the point that Lyle can come on with Emil Heskey on our last one as well. I think more players, more people in the public eye will see this as a way now that they can get their views over. Because as Lyle said...
I do just want to interrupt you. I mean, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. Our job is to sit down with people like you, Lyle, and have conversations and then represent you fairly. I think there's a difference between that and somebody taking issue with something you said. And so I don't see any reason why players should stop talking to print journalists or even TV journalists.
I don't think it's a case of that, Dee, but I also think what this period of time has allowed is for players to connect more with fans, with different platforms, have a more laid back conversation where they can feel a little bit more at ease, unpressured, and then to articulate their thoughts in an unpressured manner. You know, a lot of the times they're doing the interviews, they're told by the press guy, you know, you've got 10 minutes with him. You're trying to get all the questions out. He's trying to rush his answers to suit your questions. Doesn't come across very well, misrepresented. Danny hasn't been misrepresented here because it's actually what he said, you know, on a live Instagram platform. But yet certain people want to take issue with the way, not what he said, but the way that he said it. That's the world we're living in. And I know Lyle well enough to know that he's been more than controversial enough, let's say, Lyle, on your social media platforms at times, yeah? Talking about political agendas and that. But people strip away what he's saying. Look, he's laughing, yeah? People strip away what he's saying and then start attacking the human being. You know, and so what? He's not allowed an opinion. He's not allowed a view. He can't articulate it in the way that he wants to do it. I struggle with that, Dee. I really, really struggle with that.
I do too, because I don't think essentially there's any real difference between what he said and what, say, Sergio Aguero said or what Glenn Murray has said. He has just said it in a less formal setting. And he said it in a manner that's, again, I'll say again, lots of people would use if they were sitting in the pub talking about it casually. He is talking about it in an informal setting and he's used that kind of term. But essentially, the sentiment, a lot of people agree with.
And by the way, Dee, I don't have a problem if it's Danny Rose, if it's Sergio Aguero, if it's Glenn Murray who said it in that way. Glenn Murray's was yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, we'll just let you come back in on this one, Lyle.
No, at the end of the day, the problem that they have is the language used. And if that's an issue, then just walk out your door, go to any football match. You'll hear that and a whole lot worse. I mean, I've been on a pitch and been called a coon before. So if you want to hear bad language, go to a game of football. And these are probably 99% of our football fans who will go there and call you every name under the sun if you're playing for an opposition team. But as soon as it's out there in the pub, in the social media and the public eye, they don't think it's right. Or they don't. Now, look, I'll be honest, I am a little bit more polished, I'd say, than most when it comes to the interviews I do and the language I use. But it's only because it's, in my view, it's necessary. I can sit here and say and speak to you as I would speak to, let's say, my little brother about something like this, but I don't think it would be received in the same way. And it's all about how things land. Now, nobody can question Danny Rose's commitment or his ability. Nobody can. So what do? They go straight to he's obviously got a bad attitude because of this, that, and the other. Now, how many black players have you ever come across who have got good attitudes? Because every single one of us has got bad attitude, according to someone. And I was exactly the same. He's got bad attitude. He tosses training off. He does this. He does that. Some people just cannot win. And Danny Rose is one of those people. He cannot win. He cannot do right for doing wrong. And no matter how many people say positive things about him or the things that he's done and the things that he's said, there's going to be the same or more people saying negative things and about the things that he's done and the things that he's said. So the way I see it with him, be who you are, because you can't win anyway. You've done a massive amount for black players and the game of football. So keep doing what you're doing. And I don't want to see him walk away from the game, because at the end of the day, there are very few people, black players, who will speak out and will be completely honest. And he is one of the few.